Hauser here with another video blog on the subject of why young people are leaving the North American church. This is the second reason out of my top 10 list as to why I believe young people are leaving the church. And this reason is inspired by this book called Already Gone by Ken Ham and Britt Beamer. And the premise of the book is that although students aren't actually leaving until their mid to late teens, the exodus in their minds has already begun as early as grades 6, 7, and 8. Now, Britt Beamer, he's been cited in all kinds of national publications in the United States for his research. And so they did tons of research, tons of interviews, and some of the results I'm going to share in this video, and I find it incredibly pertinent to this whole topic. They found that of the 20 to 29-year-old evangelicals who attended church regularly but no longer do so, they found that 95% of them attended church regularly during their elementary and middle school years. 55% of them attended church regularly during high school, and 11% were still going to church during their college years. So this is just another piece of research that demonstrates this exodus. And you'll see that 90% of those that left, they did that before college. They did that in high school and middle school. They also found this out, that those who no longer believe that all the accounts and stories of the Bible are true, they found that 39.8% had their first doubts in middle school, 43.7% had their doubts in high school, and only 10.6% had their first doubts about this in college. So this is once again just pointing that this issue, it's not just about the 18 to 30-year-old bracket that's missing in our churches. This whole issue is starting all the way back in middle school, and I believe he's right. He says, let's be honest, our entire culture, including secular schools, is aggressively teaching the apologetics of evolution and secular humanism. They teach our students how to defend a humanistic worldview, and they model that worldview. They show all the reasons that they are teaching is supposedly true. The secularists are teaching our children how to defend the secular faith and connecting it to the real world. And here we are in churches teaching wonderful Bible stories and reinforcing in their minds that they can believe the secularists and that the Bible is not really connected to the real world. No wonder we are losing them. Okay, so back to the subject. She learns, talking about a girl named Susan in middle school, says she learns the science for men and women who wear white coats and safety glasses. They use test tubes and Bunsen burners. They dissect animals and use microscopes to look at cells. And they carry clipboards under their arms to record all their scientific findings. To Susan, they look smart, they do research, they test hypotheses, they prove them with their experiments. Susan knows that these people deal with real things, things you can touch and feel, the kinds of things that matter. She spends many hours a week learning from these people, and she sees that they are dealing with fact. Because of this, when the same people talk about the history of the universe, dinosaurs, fossils, the origin of life, and the like, and they interpret them in a particular way, Susan thinks they are speaking with the same authority as when they discuss their observational science that involves what you can observe and experiment with directly. Susan can't discern the difference between observational and historical science. To her, it is all science, and that is how it is usually presented anyways. And so then Susan, she goes from that environment where she's working with facts and she's with her hands on the Bunsen burners and, well, with supervision, of course, doing all this stuff. Then she goes to church. And she finds at church there's no clipboards, there's no charts, there's no timelines, there's no experiments. And quickly, Susan begins to learn that everything she's learning, it's really just about dealing with things of faith, which is different than reality. In her mind, you go to school to learn about facts and reality, and you go to church to learn Bible stories, and it becomes all this, it's just about teaching good moral stories and how to be a good person. And but in her mind, there are obvious questions that no one seems to be asking in church. And not all churches, but in many cases, they've got questions, and she said, well, no one is asking these questions. And then when she does ask them, she can't get good answers. Questions like, why is there death and suffering if God is all-powerful and all-loving and all-knowing? Why do we see the problem of evil? That's a good question. What about this whole science and faith? How do those two things connect? Did God create, or did everything just happen by a random explosion and there's like no intelligent designer at all? Are we here because we evolved from monkeys or not? What about other world religions and the nature of truth? Isn't some things just true for me and not true for everybody else? What about the Bible? How do we know the Bible is really God's Word? What evidence is there that the book wasn't written by just a bunch of guys who made up a whole bunch of stuff? What evidence is there that the Bible can really be trusted? What about Jesus? She has questions like, how do I know Jesus really existed? How do I know that he wasn't invented by people way after the fact? Or how do I know that what I see in the Gospels is really historically accurate and I can trust that Jesus died on a cross and he rose from the dead? They couldn't find his body. How do we know those things? And so the deal is, because no one asks these questions in church, she assumes that no one has the answers to these questions. And she learns pretty quickly that facts are relevant, faith is not. If you want to learn something that's real, important, and meaningful, you do that at school. If you want to learn something that is lofty and emotional, you do that at church. At school, they teach about everything. Fossils, dinosaurs, marriage, different views, gay marriage, etc., sex, the origin of life, what is right and wrong, different religions. They learn about all of these things. Yes, she's in elementary school still, but she is on her way to being one of the 20-somethings who will leave the church and never come back, not even during the holidays, pardon me, not even when she has children. I think the problem with so many churches and so many youth ministries and Sunday school programs is that we fall prey to just teaching about behavior and what's right and wrong and being a good person, and sometimes even we'll stem down into values. But have a look at this graph. It shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, that behavior actually comes from the values that we hold, values about what we believe is right and what we believe is wrong, and what's important and what's less important. And our values stem from our worldview. Does God exist? How do I know one way or the other? If God does exist, did he speak? How do I know what he wants from me and how to explain life and how to live life to the full and experience all this? And so many times we hang out only on the behavioral level. And parents, it's very seldom they're coming up saying, hey, can you teach my kids some more of that boring stuff about worldview? Because I know he was really bored by it because he was really just interested in my son was just interested in the hot girls that were at youth group, and he was also getting distracted by other things and stuff. But the world, parents very rarely are pressuring youth pastors to teach more about that stuff. They're saying, hey, my kid is, he's swearing or he's not respecting his teachers, or he's having a hard time at school, and it's so many times. Those are all important things that I think do need to be addressed. But we deal with only things on a behavioral level because that's easy. And as long as little Billy or little Susie and our house, as long as they're not causing us too much trouble, we think everything's okay. Meanwhile, their values and their worldview is going completely in an opposite direction than a faith-based direction and what God would have for them. And then we wonder why they leave. Now, a good question to a youth pastor like me is, well, Mike, why don't you teach about it more? Well, the answer is I teach on this once a year. Every year I make sure that we do a series that answers some of these questions. I also have the video blogs that talk about this stuff. But here's the thing we need to understand. If a kid actually listened to everything that I teach in an entire year, for us it's Tuesday nights for senior high, Thursday nights for junior high. If they listen to every single thing I said, and that's assuming that they're not distracted by the hot guys or hot girls or all the other social aspects or what's going on, they're listening to me. That's 40 hours a year. 40 hours a year of influence that I'm going to have over that student. The average teen in Canada, however, watches just over 3 hours per day of television. On average, that's over 1,100 hours of influence per year. And so we're seeing, and now we also know television isn't even necessarily the main influencer media-wise. We're talking, there's also on top of that, there's music, there's movies, there's internet consumption, all kinds of different media consumption. So 1,100 hours is, I'd say, on the low side of influence, and oftentimes it's completely contradicting the things that have been taught at youth group. But here's what I think we need to move towards. As a parent who sleeps 8 hours per night and works a full-time job has over 3,000 hours of influence per year with their teen. And so one thing, instead of just talking about it at youth group, which is important, we need to talk about it at youth group, we need to understand that even if we taught 40 hours a year on apologetic stuff, that's still paling in comparison to other influences. And if we can get parents on board with this exact thing about kids already gone in junior high because they're not getting their worldview fed, if parents can understand and help teach these things, I think we stand a much better chance. Really controversial statement in this, but it makes us think. Has it crossed anyone else's mind that maybe youth ministry shouldn't be fixed? Because youth ministry is a major part of the problem. The point that he's making is that we've got so many years now, about 30, 40 years of youth ministry to look back at and say, has it been working the way we've been doing it? And the stats continually show that it's not doing a good job. And the main reason is, I think, is because part of the concern is that a mere existence of youth ministry in Sunday school allows parents to shrug off their responsibilities as the primary teachers, mentors, and pastors to their family. And we know God's Word, it commands in Deuteronomy and Ephesians that the primary place that spiritual instruction should take place in is in the home. So I think we've effectively established the problem and where we need to change. Here are some solutions that I throw out just as ideas for parents and for churches and pastors to maybe help combat all of this stuff. The first thing is for parents to be evaluating the media your kids are engaging on a regular basis. If you try to evaluate the worldview stuff and you just start talking about the nature of truth and all these questions and stuff, it might seem, I don't know, awkward, and I don't know how that's going to go with them. If it's a student that regularly talks that way, and that'll be fine. But if you find out what their music is that they're listening to, and you look at what is the worldview in that song, and bring about a discussion that way, I think that's a smart way to go about it. Just be careful when you're doing this, though, that you don't lambaste your kids, or you don't, force the conversation in a way that it loses a dialogue kind of a thing. If someone asks you your opinion, and then right away they start telling you your opinion is wrong, and they start, I don't know, lambasting you, immediately you're thinking, I'm not going to share my opinion with you next time, and your student will likely do the same thing. But evaluate the media your kids are consuming, the movies, TV, all that stuff. Another idea is you need to find answers to these questions for yourself. So many adults, rather than give a good answer to a student, they'll give them a book. You give them a big fat book, or they'll say, here, watch this DVD. And I think every adult ought to have answers to the common questions like, how do we know God exists? How do we know the Bible is true? How do we know Jesus was who he said he was? And those kinds of things. Another thing you need to know, I said this in my last video, they say students that keep their faith into their 20s and beyond, they had more than 5 different adults in their life that were modeling Jesus to their kids consistently and regularly throughout their teen years. And most students these days, they don't have that. They might have a youth pastor, they might have a small group leader, but I believe we need such a bigger network of relationships for our students. So make sure you're finding 5 other adults in the life of your teenager, and then go to those 5 significant adults and make sure that they're finding answers to these questions and that they can be engaging the students in these kinds of things too. A few things for churches. Please understand, if you're a youth pastor watching this, chances are you are not going to have a whole lot of influence over the parents in your represented in your youth ministry. The senior pastor or regular speaker on Sundays, they are more often than not, they are the ones that can influence parents. Senior pastors, you can address this regularly throughout the whole year. Parents want help. They need to know, how do I engage my students? How do I do this kind of stuff? And so the senior pastor often is the person who can provide that. We need to create environments in our churches where apologetics are mixed into things. So small groups where throughout the small groups for students and adults, apologetics is getting weaved into that. Having classes, maybe bringing in a guest speaker every now and then on a Sunday who knows how to talk about these things. Couple other ideas. One is, so many churches are over-programmed. Their parents are driving their kids here, there, and everywhere every night of the week, and there's no time for parents to actually have the kind of time to dialogue with their kids on these kinds of things. And it's an enemy to parents. Programs are an enemy to parents in that it divides up all the family time. And it's also an enemy to youth pastors because often they spend most of their time just trying to sustain a program instead of focusing on networking relationships and maybe doing things that might have a bigger impact than just a program. The last thing I'd throw out there is the way we do church often, it loses kids. And I'll do a whole video blog on this, the 10th one. But anyways, we need to change the way we do church on Sunday mornings. Make sure that the Sunday speaker, he's speaking in a way that is understandable to young people, that engages their emotions and they can relate, say, oh man, I felt that, I've wondered that, instead of just all the information that's given in most sermons. So anyway, stay tuned for that video blog. Thank you for watching this. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your Facebook profile or your Twitter. And the more people that watch these and comment on them, I think the more solutions are going to be found and the more that we can collaborate and work on this stuff together. You can also click here to subscribe to my channel, and every time I have a new video, you'll get notification about that. Here's some other resources that might help on all of this stuff, and thanks for watching. Hey!